Bonjour, bonjour à tous. Good afternoon, everyone. We will now call the meeting to order. Madame la greffière.
Your Worship, we have an agenda before us with no changes or additions.
So, merci, Madame la greffière. If there are there any changes from council? No. So I need a.
Agenda first.
Comment on fait ça, là?
Up. So, Councillor
Okay.
Richard, you move it? Can I, a second?
Conseiller Richard moved, seconded by Conseiller Leblanc. Conseiller Leblanc. Donc, en faveur, in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carried. Merci, Madame la greffière.
We have the following minutes for adoption: June 24th, 2024, October 28th, 2024, January 27th, 2025, and February 24, 2025.
Merci, Madame la greffière. Conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Oui, merci. J'avais appuyé mon bouton parce que j'aimerais d'ajouter quelque chose à l'ordre du jour. Je peux juste l'ajouter à haute si ça va avec tout le monde, sinon...
Is everyone in agreement with adding to under other? Oui, c'est beau.
Okay.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. Donc,
A mover and a seconder for the adoption of minutes.
for the adoption of the
Minutes.
So I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes, please. Conseiller Léger and Conseiller Leblanc. Donc, is this a manual vote again? So all in favor signify by saying aye. Trust. There's none. Donc,
And then new business, municipal plan update by Josh Davies, Alex Forbes, and Greg Bender.
bonjour, Josh. No, no.
Voila. Okay, you're not going to hear much from me to begin with, so I think what I'm going to do is actually turn it over to our municipal plan coordinator, Alex Forbes, and he's going to do the introduction of our consultant, Greg Bender from WSP. But I will be here to take questions.
Merci.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thériault, for the opportunity to present to you today. I think I was here back in March of last year. I was here with Bill Budd. We were kicking off the municipal plan review process. So we're taking the opportunity today to update all of council in regard to what we've been doing over the last year. So since I was here last March, of course, we put together a request for proposal. We had a good response on the request for proposal. It was a nice cross-section of firms from across the country who bid on it. Some of them are regional, some of them were national. But we did get some good uptake on that, and I'll introduce Greg Bender from WSP in a moment. But the RFP was finalized, I think, in November of last year, and then we really started in earnest with the consultant in January of this year. But at the same time, we also established the Municipal Plan Review Steering Committee, and they started their work in October of last year. So we've been meeting with them monthly to update generally onboard them in regard to the process. I would remind Council that this is a bit of a larger undertaking because it's both the municipal plan review and the zoning bylaw at the same time. A lot of communities just do their municipal plan and then they do the zoning bylaw. So that leads me to Greg Bender, who will speak to you today. Greg is from WSP, a national firm, a very large firm with a lot of engineering capacity. Greg is the Director of Community Planning, Transportation, and Infrastructure, both experienced in preparing municipal plans and in zoning bylaws. Some consultants specialize in one or the other, so we got both. And just as an aside, they had the most amount of recent work doing municipal plans and zoning bylaws. So we felt very pleased that we were able to get a very strong consultant to help us on this process. Again, Greg will thank you.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor, members of council. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. As Alex noted, I am Greg Bender from WSP. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. Felt that having this with the committee would be very important, just to sort of kick off the process from your perspective, and to just sort of lay out the entire work program, get some feedback from you. Certainly here to answer any questions that any of you might have, and we can certainly tag team that with members of staff as needed. Just before we begin, wanted to do a land acknowledgement, just to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional unceded territory of Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq peoples. So what I want to do is talk to you just a bit about the team that you've retained, talk about some of our expertise, what we're actually going to be doing to contribute to both the update to the municipal plan and the zoning bylaw. Talk about the project overview, the work program, specifically around the community engagement overview, and then talk about the next steps. Certainly, as I mentioned, this is a bit of a kickoff for sort of the work program, but certainly there's a much larger, more public-facing kickoff scheduled to happen over the next few weeks. So as Alex mentioned, WSP is the lead, project management and planning lead for this particular assignment. We are leading the preparation of the municipal plan and zoning bylaw, and certainly leading the engagement of this particular program. We've partnered with Williams and Stewart as well as Parcel. Williams and Stewart is leading the sort of review and update of urban design policies, as well as providing policy directions, renderings, 3D modeling as needed to support the discussion around urban design. We've also partnered with Parcel, who's going to be leading the update to inclusionary zoning and providing a policy basis to update that in the municipal plan and regulations in the land use bylaw. I'm sure I don't need to explain this in any great detail, but you have sort of 3 levels of sort of planning hierarchy in the province. You have your Community Planning Act, which really sort of sets the stage for regional and local planning in the province. And then as it gets more detailed, you go down to the municipal plan and then the zoning bylaw. Municipal plan long-term policy document guides how the city, sort of as a vision document, how the city is to grow and accommodate that growth over time. And then you have your zoning bylaw, which is really a property by property sort of look at, where buildings are to be on the property, what type of buildings, what type of use, and where that's to be identified in the city. Again, I'm sure you have enough context on what a municipal plan is, but as I mentioned, it is a very long-term policy document, contains a series of goals, a vision, objectives, and really sets the tone for how growth is to be accommodated in the city. It addresses a number of topics as it relates to housing, employment, environmental sustainability, and developing the economy. Among other ones, certainly, but these are some of the larger ones. And really this document is formed based on the input we receive from members of council, members of the public, other interested parties, which we use to develop directions, which will all be before you again as the work program advances. And then what we would do is formulate that in an updated municipal plan document as well as the land use bylaw. As I mentioned, the zoning bylaw is a much more detailed document. It regulates the sort of land and built form, where a building is to be located on a particular property. And it does that through setbacks and sort of zone requirements. As I mentioned, it identifies sort of where driveways are to be located, how much a building can actually be located on a property in terms of lot coverage, and something that we'll be reviewing with staff later in the particular process. So the reason why the city's undertaking this particular process is because the Community Planning Act requires you to do so. Every 10 years, a plan is to be reviewed just to make sure it's consistent with any changing legislation, but also is it consistent with where the city is going. A lot of things can happen in 10 years, so the plan is required to be updated because you might have a different direction in which we're growing, or it might need to be changed depending on what has sort of evolved in the city over the past 10 years. It does represent a significant opportunity for the municipal plan and zoning bylaw to be updated to ensure that it aligns with, again, changing legislation and planning policy in the province. It also creates, a significant opportunity to really understand, based on input from council and interested parties, where the community is to grow. How is it going to evolve? And this is a good opportunity because we will be revising the vision, which sets that stage for how the plan is to be developed. And that's going to accommodate sort of the planning horizon and growth to 2051. So the work program is being developed over 6 phases. It's just 1 to 3. So we've completed phase 1, which is really just sort of exploring, it's reviewing background information, sort of proposing how we are to engage with the community interested parties as well as First Nations rights holder and communities in terms of that outreach. Where we are right now is really sort of the background report, sort of compiling all the information that we reviewed, identifying where there's opportunities to perhaps change or where the major influences are based on what has changed. So the provincial legislation is an example. We are approaching a consultation cluster, which I'll get into in a little bit. And then sort of what we're going to do as part of this also is do an engagement summary. In phase 3, we're looking at sort of developing. So looking at the big moves, we're looking at a policy directions report. That work that I mentioned Parcel will be looking at in terms of inclusionary zoning and density bonusing. There's a consultation cluster and then an engagement summary that will summarize all the engagement that we've completed in phase 3. I do note that consultation will evolve and continue throughout all phases. I'm just touching on a few sort of major milestones in each of the phases 1 through 3. In phase 4, we're looking at really preparing and updating the municipal plan, looking at updating the zoning bylaw, engaging based on those updates, and summarizing what was achieved or learned through that engagement. Once we complete phase 4, we're looking at really understanding how the documents will be defended. So there's going to be a legal review and translation just to make sure that everything that's been proposed can stand on its own merit. There's going to be additional consultation, an engagement summary, and then we're looking to finalize the documents at the end of phase 5. And then phase 6 is really the sort of the final engagement summary and meeting with council to have council consider adopting those documents at that time. And that's going to be in 2026. So what we've completed to date. So it says a site visit. It was certainly more than the site. It was the entire city, and we went on a bus and did a tour of the entire city, which I really enjoyed. Not having been in Moncton that many times, this was a really good opportunity for me to understand how the city has evolved, where some of the challenges are, and looking to really learn and listen as part of that particular visit. We've prepared a community engagement plan, which benefited from review and comment from city staff. We also did a participant and rights holder scan and analysis, which really just identifies all the various, as it might suggest, participants and right holders that we want to engage throughout this particular process. The document will remain live, which means if we learn of other participants or rights holders or interested parties, we will have this document be updated to make sure that it takes that into consideration. The background report is underway. It is nearly complete. Certainly we want to have that include the kickoff, the engagement cluster that we're aiming to have over the month of June. And then once we'll take all that input, we'll consider that in the background report just to understand what we've heard and what we need to consider through this particular process. The background review report will include, obviously, provincial legislation and sort of all the influences in land use planning in the city, but it also include sort of demographics, how that has changed and will evolve over time, land use, economy, finances, transportation, and municipal facilities and services. Certainly we'll be looking at that to understand how those are going to influence the work program and the municipal plan. It's also a compilation of all the background documents and the good work the city has done since the last municipal plan was developed. We also have a launch on the municipality's project webpage, and that has been completed as well. So this is just a highlight in terms of the community engagement program we're embarking on. So phase 2, as I mentioned, the consultation cluster, that's actually being actioned in June. It's a visioning exercise. It's very aspirational. It's meant to really understand with the participants what their sort of snapshot is of the city, how it's changed, and where they think it's going to go. We're going to be doing that through a meeting or a kickoff at the Capitol Theatre on the 10th. And then we're going to be having a follow-up session on June 17th. I'll identify those dates again as part of the next steps. Another consultation cluster is identified in phase 3. The intent of this is to really review with participants, background review policy directions to make sure that we're all aligned, so that when we update the municipal plan as part of phase 4, we've sort of captured everything that we've heard, and then there'll be an opportunity in phase 4 to really understand if we did that correctly, if there's any additional input needed or any revisions needed at that time. And then in phase 5, again, there's finalizing the documents, looking to again sort of just understand from the participants if we've captured everything that they've provided to us, we've interpreted it appropriately, and that we've updated the documents accordingly. As I understand with confirmation from staff, that sort of initiation letter has gone out, or will be going out to First Nation rights holders as part of the engagement and consultation program. Sort of any successful project certainly must ensure that you have First Nations rights holders and they're meaningfully engaged and you are working with the relationship that you have as part of any particular project. It is guided by the DIA, and certainly staff have been working very closely with them to ensure that, again, the path forward is aligned with what their experience is, and they've advised in terms of how that might need to change depending on the response received. The engagement program will ensure that consultation activities are managed and continuously managed. So if, for instance, a particular approach doesn't work or isn't perhaps as receptive as what we're looking for, it can evolve. But we need input, and we need to embark on that particular process first. And I understand that that's happening very shortly. Certainly what I want to identify, and this isn't just for First Nations rights holders, consultation is based on principles of trust, respect, and transparency. The more transparent and the respect that we offer, we will get that in return, and that's something that we certainly are adhering to as part of this particular process. We want to be open and transparent so we can get as much valuable input in this process as we can. Certainly, all of this being in line with the city's existing protocols and the relationships that you've built over the number of years. In no particular order, there are a number of engagement activities and methods that are being identified: council meetings, open houses, public meetings, the committees that have been struck, focus groups, pop-ups, which are really just sort of places in the community where people might gather that we can get input that not everybody's going to want or can show up to an open house, a formal open house. So having people placed in the community to get additional input certainly adds significant value. Using the city's existing tools, such as the website, social media platforms, will certainly help, again, get the word out to make sure that we get as much input as we can as part of this particular process. And the bilingual approach that we've identified as well, which I think that certainly the city is supportive of, is that a fully bilingual team member will attend all engagement throughout the city, just to ensure that we are able to communicate to everybody that shows up. So we've added that as part of our work program as well. That, again, in addition to public-facing documents, which are to be translated, we'll have people at those meetings who can speak in both official languages. In terms of one of the sort of first major exercises that we're doing, as I mentioned, as part of the consultation cluster, is establishing a vision. Now, you certainly have a vision in your existing municipal plan, which certainly could still hold a value. But what we want to do is aim to engage with the community and interested parties to make sure that, again, is it reflective of where they think the community in the city is growing? So that's one of the exercises that we're going to be doing through the visioning workshops that we're having in June. Again, to understand through an aspirational sort of discussion, what do they like about the city? Where do they think some of the challenges are? How can we overcome those challenges? Where do they think the city's going to be in the next 20, 30 years? So what we'll do is we'll develop a vision statement. It will also include guiding principles, which will set the tone for the development of policy in the municipal plan and the documents we'll be preparing. So in terms of next steps, I know I've gone through a lot of it fairly quickly. I am happy to answer any particular questions any members of council may have. But as I mentioned, again, with the consultation cluster, and I might be getting back to this more than perhaps what you were expecting, but it is an extremely important exercise as part of this program because of it's the first major public-facing engagement series that we're having. So as I mentioned, there's a meeting with First Nation rights holders and communication being sent out for that. There's a city-led project kickoff event on June 10th at the Capitol Theatre, and certainly it's less talking about the work program and more just getting people excited and providing that opportunity for people to talk and celebrate the city. The Vision Workshop is a continuation of that, but more about the work program and more around the municipal plan and establishing that vision or updating that vision that I talked about. There's the Let's Chat Moncton Places tool, which is an opportunity to, again, receive feedback and post. There's community pop-ups, there's focus group meetings that we've identified, again, sort of more focused group meetings to engage with members of the community and to really provide that sort of one-on-one discussion that, again, might be a little easier than having a larger session. There's development community meeting that's been identified, as well as that summary of summarizing everything that we've heard and how that's going to influence sort of the next steps of the work program. And then once we complete all that, we're going to finalize the background report, which will be identified for public release. And with that, members of council, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. That concludes my presentation.
Merci beaucoup, Greg. Conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Thanks for the presentation. I do have one question. For First Nations, there is a very strict legal framework that we must follow when we consult First Nations. The jurisprudence, I'm not sure if it's the Federal Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court, but it was a pipeline going through BC, and they had to redo their work. And there is I think it's a 5-step process. I don't know where I was, but anyways, there's a strict, very clear and precise, specific things that must be done for effective consultation with the First Nations. Are we obligated to follow this legally prescribed, criteria-defined process when we do the municipal plan?
So through the Deputy Mayor to the Councillor, I can certainly defer to members of staff, but the due to consult is for large major infrastructure projects is a little different than what's required for this particular project. Now, I did mention that we're working very closely with the DIA just to make sure that we're aligned. But it is not necessarily the same process because of the impacts and how high level this particular process is. And certainly I can defer to city staff to answer that.
Bonjour. Oui, essentiellement, c'est ça. There's no duty to consult per se from a municipality's perspective. It's only that obligation only applies to the federal and the provincial government. But we're doing this step as well. Like Greg said, it may not necessarily be the same format as what is required, but essentially to get their the input as well.
So there is no risk involved in going through consultations that somebody later on will say, well, you didn't follow the jurisprudence.
Not from a municipal perspective, no.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Richard.
Merci, Maire Asterio. Thank you for the presentation, explanations. Could you elaborate on the June 17th workshops?
Certainly. And through the Deputy Mayor, good question. The session on June 17th is really in a workshop session. So it's being finalized, but we have, in theory, sort of a number of tables set up that would be theme-based, where we could, if people want to hear about transportation or housing and the environment, they can pick a particular table and have an open discussion around what their experiences are. We will have questions for them, but it might be easier to extract what we want to get just by having conversations. So we'll have a number of sort of questions and workshops set up individually as it relates to themes around the municipal plan.
And the people that are going to be attending these workshops, have they already been invited, or is that invite going to be going out soon? Or?
I might defer that to Josh.
Yeah, so as Greg mentioned, we're kind of working through the, I guess, the agenda and a bit of the structure. But right now, we can confirm that it's going to be held at Legends at the Moncton Coliseum. And typically, what we try to do is make sure that we're not sending the invite out too far in advance, because then by the time it gets put out through socials, people can forget. So it's usually about 2 weeks is kind of the sweet spot. So similar to putting out the invitations and putting out the discussion along the formal launch on the 10th, we'll try to be about 2 weeks ahead of time so that people can have it in their calendars. And in this case, we'll be having an afternoon and an evening session to make sure that we can get people that can make it during the day, but also for people who are maybe full-time up with work or what have you that can attend an evening session as well. Again, with the idea of trying to get as many people through the door as we can.
Yeah, and I mean, if I look at my own calendar, I'm looking way farther than 2 weeks.
That's
myself,
right.
so-
Yeah, but I think we can find and Loma can correct me too. But I think typically 2 weeks through the social media, making sure everything's in advance. A lot of this stuff is there because we have to get it translated in advance, make sure that we're populating, getting the work done on the back end. But typically we do aim for 2 weeks. But if there are some bigger things that we know are going to be, well attended or highly sought after, we can try to get those a bit more ahead of time. But it's always a bit of a chasing the dragon type situation. Yeah.
I'm glad it's you that's chasing. One thing I'd like to say that I appreciated the land acknowledgement at the beginning of your presentation, and this might be a question to staff, is that do we have to go through this to get a land acknowledgement at our meetings, or is that work that's in process? I really appreciated you doing that.
Thank you. That is something that is in process. Shelley has been working with our First Nations communities, looking for the proper acknowledgement that we could use for our meetings. So that's something that is going to be forthcoming to council.
We have any timeline
Likely when we review the procedural bylaw, so coming up this summer.
this summer? Appreciate that. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Conseiller Richard. Conseiller Steves.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It might be a question for Josh, just in regards to those engagement sessions and just going off what Councillor Richard was saying. Greg mentioned one of the reasons is to get people excited. That might be a stretch, isn't it? The Moncton Wildcats Parade is going to get people excited. The municipal plan engagement piece. What are we learning from other engagement sessions we have done? Are we getting better as a city at those? How many do we expect? And can there be some questions as part of the social media push that will engage people to want to come and answer the questions we want them to answer or engage with? I just think it's a real stretch to say these meetings are to get people excited, but I could be wrong about that. Help me.
I think it's exciting for people that are doing it every day. But I guess to answer your question, Councillor, is from our perspective in terms of doing consultations, so for example, the 4-unit amendments we went through, Vision Lands, other exercises we've gone through, I think what we're finding is that if we have other events that we can piggyback on with respect to other things that the corporation is doing or things that are happening in the city, we actually can probably get a better turnout. So to your point, depending on the timing, if for example, if the Wildcats are playing, again, like say it's in the fall, maybe that's when we can go set up a booth at a Wildcats game where there are going to be 8,000 people that we can talk to, rather than necessarily trying to go out on our own and trying to your point, say, well, what's really going to be the driving point that's going to make somebody want to attend a city type session? Because you're right, it is hard. People are busy, and I think in saying that as well, the public events, I think they're going to be designed to really inform conversation, and if we do it really well, then we'll continue to see those same people coming back. So what we have found is if we do have a content where it's not myself standing up at a mic talking to everybody, and they feel like they're having a part of the conversation, they're able to move around. We've had some really great sessions at the Mapleton Lodge doing it that way, where people can kind of filter in and filter out. They can have a one-on-one conversation, or they can ask a question in a group. We're trying to be as, I guess, adaptable and as flexible as we can. In addition to that, a lot of people may not have time to attend, so we're working very closely on the project page, working on a generic email that is a City of Moncton email that 7 or 8 of us are going to have access to. So if you have a question, you could email, I believe it's plan.municipal@moncton.ca. I'm working on getting a phone line set up so people can call and leave questions. To your point, trying to, as much as we can get out there and as much information as we can receive in a way and also process it. I think at the end of the day is as long as if we make the pitch that it's around visioning, it's around where we feel we can go, hopefully we'll get some more public input on it. And I hope people get excited about it, because it's not often that we get to do something like this. It's probably once every 10 years. And a lot of planners don't ever really get to do a municipal plan review relative to I guess, how they move through their careers. But again, it's going to be on administration and the project team to really make sure that we do get that level of excitement up, so that we're not having 10 to 15 people show up for something where we have a city of 100,000 people. And so I think, as Greg mentioned too, we can be flexible, and what's written in the engagement plan today in terms of a session is not concrete. And if we do find opportunities where we can find things, so for example, the city will be going to EnviroFest. We're hosting it. We're going to be talking a lot about conservation. So we'll be going to, the municipal plan team will be going there to talk about the vision, about the municipal plan itself, but also to talk about conservation, knowing that that's what a lot of those people attending are going to want to be talking about. So it's try to be it's hard for us to be fluid in an administrative structure, but we're going to try to be as fluid as we can, to your point, to get the questions and making sure that everyone really feels like they have an ability to participate.
Okay, thank you very much. Just don't forget the common person who doesn't really care. Like, we've got to really try to engage them, right? Back to Councillor Bourgeois, 33% vote. Like, people don't care, but I think they do if the questions are right.
I agree. Yeah, that's right.
Good.
Yeah.
Merci, conseiller Steves. Conseiller Léger.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Thanks. I guess, to pick up on that, I'm happy to hear that you're going to go out to places where people are. So I would suggest the Moncton Market, because people go there on a regular basis. Also, some of the, the fourplex, there's a lot of stuff that happens there. So I think that that's really important. Just a question. So you're launching this at the Capitol, which is a great venue, but why are you launching it at 2 o'clock? Where most people really are working and so on. Why don't we do this in the evening when, you have the ability to bring a lot of people in and so on? I get the same question, by the way, on why we meet at 4 o'clock as City Council meeting, if you really want the public to be involved.
Accommodations, accessibility, and space size, and I guess the afternoon we felt worked well relative to trying to get the Capitol, for example, in the evening. So it's like it was available, and it was more challenging actually than we had anticipated to try to actually book a venue even like a month or so or well in advance. So just in terms of the way the things shook out, we felt that that an afternoon kickoff, I'm assuming they were with media, and I believe, again, putting those invitations out weeks in advance, that we still will get a good turnout. But point taken, we can look at maybe for more formal or more, I guess, items in the evening that we can take on in future consultations. But to your point, like getting to the market, getting to all those places, we got to try to be everywhere that we can. But in this case, we felt that a 2 o'clock afternoon presentation for the formal kickoff would work. But again, if we find that for future events that we need to push towards more of an evening presence, then we can certainly do so.
No, and that's good. I think, though, a lot of it as well is in the wording that we're using. So, coming back to Councillor Steves, indicating, for the people who just really don't know, but they don't know most people would know what a municipal plan is to begin with, and what impact that has. They know the impact it has when all of a sudden the zoning is changed in their area, and then all of a sudden they respond. So how do we make that language friendlier for people to really want to be engaged? Do you know that the zoning could change in your neighborhood? That parkland that you feel it will always be there will not. do you want to have your say? I think would bring a lot of people out that would say, well, whoa, just a minute now. So I don't know what experience other municipalities have had, but I find that that's really a gap. And we see it often in the developments that come before council. So maybe some thinking in terms of communication using simple terms that will really engage, really make people, understand that green space behind them or those vacant lots that are there could be brought together and a bigger project could happen, or apartment buildings could go up, as we've seen recently behind Shanex, and so on.
Yeah.
Just some thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would say, and I'll turn it over to Greg too, because he certainly has a lot of experience in other municipalities. But what we're finding is that we have to be able to make things digestible and consumable in what I would say is a short space of time. So to your point, what you just explained would be really hard to put on a social media post. So
You might
again,
have to do it several times.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's sort of
bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, and I know that communications is really working on a number of strategies that have similar type of issues, I guess, in terms of trying to get the feedback and how can we get people to be meaningfully engaged. And from our perspective, I think a lot of short answer questions where you can sort of say, here's the question, get back to us in like the space of a tweet. Like that might be something that people will then do, but they may not take a 10-page document that I wrote about the benefits and contrasts of densification. There maybe is probably a better way of putting that into something that is digestible and someone can deal with in the space of like 3 to 5 minutes, because that seems to be where the reception and the responses are going. But I think the first, like the vision session, and there's always those traditional type planning events that we have. But again, in trying to be fluid, and it would be better if we have a city again of 100,000 people. If we could have that engagement, like even if it was to be like 10% or something, would be an immense success. So how can we try to get the message and spread things out as much as we can, knowing that we want to try to get as many responses as we can. But to your point, in some cases, as you know, the planning and the files can be very complex. So again, so it's like what do they need to know, and what's the best way to tell them? And I'll turn it over to Greg, because I'm sure they have examples from other municipalities, bigger municipalities, where they've tackled the same issue.
Thanks, Josh. And through the deputy to the councillor, you're right. We need to be very simple in the terminology we use. If we use the terminology that might be necessarily identified in land use bylaw or the plan, it's probably not going to relate to a lot of people. I mean, reflecting on the councillor's comment before around how do you make this exciting? I mean, excitement's all relative to the audience. Is it as exciting as going to a hockey game? I mean, maybe not. But excitement could be through participation. So somebody might show up through the social media posts, through some of the online presence around what we can get out of this. And you have to be very careful on how, the audience that you bring. You could show something, if you really want to get people out, show something contentious, and they'll show up, but for a different reason. We want to keep it fairly positive and aspirational at this point, but there are ways to do that. There are ways to show through graphics to say, how do you want your community to evolve? You will naturally get more people living here. So how is that going to be accommodated? Is it through sort of the densification that Joshua was mentioning, through some vacant lots or through the fourplexes? That is an option, and that's something that you can show, because housing is extremely important across the country. And it's certainly important in the city, but the messaging around that is what we want people to be able to shape. So as I mentioned, as Josh mentioned, the engagement strategy is a living document. We will do our best to try and communicate and get people to attend various events. If it's not working, we will have to pivot and evolve to make sure that, again, we're nimble and we can, again, update our messaging and perhaps even change our communication styles.
I think having your say is really important. I would also encourage a way to reach out to maybe grade 12s in the city who are engaged in what their future can look like. And it's interesting because when we did the 4-unit as a right public hearing, we had a person who came in as a proponent to what we were about to do. And his motivation really is that he felt that this would perhaps be a way where he could sometime own a home. And so I think those are important. That's not the side that we get from another cohort. And so I think that those things are really important. And I don't know if you've identified a percentage of population that makes our municipal plan valid. And should we? And so then it forces you to go further. Because often what happens is the people who are interested show up, and the ones that, are busy, their lives are busy and so on, they don't, and they never get to say anything. And yet it becomes very important to them later on. Comments?
And through the deputy mayor to the councillor, so very, very true. That's why years and years and years ago, we would have an open house. Some people might show up, maybe nobody, and you tick the box and you move on. Say, wow, we attempted, but nobody seemed to be interested. We're probably doing 10 or 15 more things than we ever did because we know they work. Are we going to have 1,000 people at the event? No. Maybe, fingers crossed, but it would be rare to get that. But it depends, and that's why we're at a pop-up, and they provide very, very valuable input. So and again, if there are other things that we can consider, we will certainly consider those. And as I mentioned before, Councillor, we also have a stakeholder or interested party scan, which identifies, 20, 30, 40 different groups, including youth and schools. But we're also hoping that our committees and members of council can engage with their known parties, that they can, again, get the word out to get people interested in the conversation.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Look forward to the input. And the 2 sessions at Legends, so one will be, this is on the 17th of June, one will be in the afternoon and one will be the evening?
Correct.
And so afternoon, maybe 2 to 4, and then evening, maybe 7 to 9 or something like that?
I don't recall about that. I don't know if the timing's been 100% confirmed, but something like that.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Léger. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who would like to speak? Donc, il n'y a personne. Donc, Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. I just wanted to provide information based on Councillor Steve's and Councillor Léger's pertinent questioning. Mr. Bender, were you at the last meeting of the Plan Review Committee?
Yes, I was.
You remember the dialogue we had?
Sorry, through the deputy mayor. I was not at the last one.
Right. And Josh wasn't either. We had that discussion. We said things like we have to make our PR, first of all, layperson terms, but mostly, how does it relate to their daily experiences and the examples that Councillor Léger. So we were, the short answer would have been, yeah, we're on it. But anyways, it's okay to discuss it because it serves the purpose of, I think we have, reporters here, so they might cover it. And but explaining it, why it matters. Our next meeting is on June 12th. Councillor Edgett and I sit on the committee. I'll add that the last time I sat on the Plan Review Committee, 2010, 2012, and we had several public meetings. The last one, I think, was at the Capitol Theatre, and there were, if not 100 people close to it that attended, and it was a Café du Monde session. You'd go from table to table with specific themes per table. So whatever the PR, the public engagement will look like. I know that Aloma Jardine is doing other stuff as well. What kind of groups specifically we would invite? There's a whole bunch of public relations and communications. But since we're discussing it, hoping that the media will cover it. I think it'd be nice if we knew the time, on June 17th, and we know it's at the Legends at the Moncton Coliseum, but it would have been nice today to let the public know that on June 17th. Otherwise, there's like 3 weeks left, so okay, maybe the 2 weeks, but tous les moyens sont bons, and the more we can repeat it, the more people might hear it today, but won't listen to it when it comes out as a press release. So anyways, just wanted to provide that information. So we're on it, but we haven't fixed a specific strategy for how to draw people in. but we're on it. Thank you very much. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. Thank you, Josh, Alex, and Greg for the presentation. I just want to say that I agree with the colleagues. I think we really need to be creative with this. We need to get to the common people, to those who don't really usually maybe get involved, but we need as many people involved as possible. We also should create maybe partnerships. So, for example, I'm thinking of the Chamber of Commerce. They have many events, so not just one event, but maybe we could be there on a regular basis. So, just so that we can really create some excitement around this. It's a great project. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madame la Greffière.
Up next is Citywide Data Strategy, and Ryan Sorey's here to present.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor Terrio and members of council. Just here to talk a little bit about the citywide data strategy. But before we get to that, I just want to take the opportunity, I guess, to go back a little bit and reflect back on a number of decisions that were made that really kind of advanced the city from a data perspective. And, you know, it was your guys' vision and support that really got us to where we're going and where we are today. So thank you for that. And if I look back, some of you would remember in 2016, 2017, the City of Moncton started down an open data policy scenario where we were, you know, we positioned to be open by default. We use this data to do things like create, you know, the web apps online and start to show our residents the data. We used it to share with businesses and other people, educational institutions, as they would come in and request data. And every one of those requests, when they came in, they were not just provided to that individual, they were provided publicly so that they could be tapped into and used by other organizations. So we have this history of going back and looking at open data and how things were going. So then we kind of move it forward a little bit. And in 2023, 2024, the city, you know, through your support, embarked on a digital strategy. This digital strategy was kind of shaping how we move forward with data over the next number of years. And what was really exciting about that is it created this vision that leadership team put together to support council's priorities of delivering great services and experiences powered by technology, data, and people. And that statement kind of resonates. It's like, how do we use technology, data, and people to provide these great experiences and great services to our citizens? As that project was coming to a close, this is the time when Mayor Arnold came and said, there's a Harvard Bloomberg opportunity for the Citywide Data Alliance on a data strategy. Any interest? Strategy we put together is broken down into 5 work streams: great experiences, great services, technology, data, and people. And we looked at that and said this would actually really, really push that data work stream that we have forward. And it'll give us support, it'll give us help, coaching and mentoring all through that. So we went through that process, and I'll just So we just started into this process and going through the application. And even that application process really, from my perspective, was a little painful because it pointed out a number of things, a number of areas that, you know what, we can do better in. And we can start to see, and it showed where we use data and where we didn't use data and how this can grow. And we went through this whole piece. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Bloomberg approach is, the view is change happens where municipalities are, where people are the closest to government and in municipalities. So they really push on changing and using data to drive and help drive municipalities forward. So we went through this process and we're successful, and you would have been aware and part of it last summer where we did the kickoff and we started a 6-month process. And the 6-month process had 2 pieces to it. It had the citywide data strategy and it had a resident impacting data project. So I'm here just to give you kind of a quick update on the data side of the house, and I will also talk about the resident impacting one as well. A couple of key notes, Lauren Caskey and Kel Wang, these were our coaches. Some of you had the opportunity to meet them last August. They were fantastic through this. They provided so much support to the team intern, really, really challenged us on how to think differently, how to change the culture, how to start using data to really influence and move pieces forward. The outcomes of this. Obviously, we've created a citywide data strategy that goes on there. It covers 5 different pillars: data governance, quality, capacity, use, and transparency. So all of these things all have work plans underneath them. They all have times. They all have people looking at this stuff on a daily basis. And things, some stuff that we've already seen. For example, on the data governance side, we had, at the City of Moncton here, staff had a data work group. You know, and it was just a select couple of people who were kind of understood data, understood structured data, and wanted to see what we could do more. That has grown into a data governance committee internally, and it's cross-department. It's going through, and we're using that group to really start to leverage and drive the use of data. And how do we use it, right? So are we using it in the right way? Let me just read it so I don't read it wrong. The outcome of this, so the vision was that the City of Moncton will responsibly and ethically leverage the power of data to create a thriving, inclusive, and sustainable community for all residents. So that governance committee has those things on their mind when they're looking at how we use data and how it goes forward. So it's growing this area. We've seen a number of pieces. There's that. With the Housing Accelerator Fund, there's a number of data aspects that we're pouring into that as we're working on it. So the Bloomberg Harvard piece really shared and encouraged that work going forward. How does it look like? You know, what does it look like? Well, we all know the buzzwords in the world today are AI and all these wonderful things. But when you look at AI, the basis for AI is data. And if you do not have your data in a good, structured, clean place, you cannot use it, right? You can try using AI, but you're going to get inaccurate responses and all these pieces. So we're trying to really, really focus on getting it structured for that. We're also using it now in the Resident Impact Data Project. So this is actually, it ties in, I guess, a little bit with what you were all just talking about. But we're working with urban planning to kind of look at the urban growth strategy and how data can be there, and how can we relate that into an online or a how do we visualize that data? How do we show it? How do we put that out there so people are able to see what we have and make decisions based on that? So when we come through this all, just real briefly in summary, when we come through it, we're on a journey, and we're never going to be at the other side. We're always going to be doing it, but I just wanted to let you all know that your support's been huge on getting this, as people are seeing things change, and people culturally, from a staff perspective, people are looking at data differently and starting to ask questions on how can I do this, and how can I show this, and how can I be more efficient with the use of data. So that's where we're going. So that's kind of how we got there, and a real quick overview of the data strategy. So if you have any questions, please.
Merci beaucoup. Conseiller Richard.
Merci, Matt Esterio. You got me excited on this one. So when you talk about efficiencies and technology, I'm all in. So digital for me means the information that's there, accessible anytime from anywhere, using good tools, phones. We've already done a few steps. How far have we gone? How far are we left?
From a
For protection.
security perspective,
Yeah.
so security is ongoing, right? That's one of those ones where we're constantly moving away. What I'm very comfortable with is if I was to look back 1 year, we're in a significantly better place than where we were a year ago. And we're going to continue to look forward and continue to make changes and take from learnings from some peers and friends. So from a security perspective, we're moving along from identity access management, kind of a zero trust, all of those pieces to make sure that we're as secure as possible.
Because that's complicated, and to keep up with and not, I mean, you've got it on all fronts, so.
Yes, I agree. It's the one thing in my world that when people say, what keeps you up at night? The security of it, right? That's what it is.
Good luck. Merci.
Thanks.
Thank you. Merci, Conseiller Richard. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Thank you very much, Ryan. Nice to see progress on this file on the Bloomberg City Data Alliance and the follow-up. But you presented this as something that started in 2016. I'm quoting you. Council was involved starting in late 2014 by appointing and I don't remember the exact terminology, but it was something about open data. You sat on it.
Yes.
I sat on
Yes.
it. The idea was a gentleman by the name of Scott Agnew, who works in those data analysis functions. So I just wanted to, first of all, I guess, remind you that City Council started in 2015 on this, not 2016. But it leads me to my question, whatever happened to our report?
Okay, so the 2017, that was in relation to when the open data policy was approved. So yes, there was, I remember the committee that we were part of, and I'm struggling to remember the name of it. But yes, that happened prior to it. And there was much more digital and data stuff even before that. I was just starting at kind of what the open data was. I would have to look back. I don't know what happened to that report right off, off my cuff. That was 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
Okay, it's not the end of the world, but it's 10 years. So I'd be curious enough to know why we waited 10 years to get to this point. Could we have done it earlier? But it's a bit of, I guess, looking in the mirror rather than looking through the windshield. But if there are lessons to be learned about taking 10 years to start and finish to where we are now, is there something to learn about moving forward? So I'll leave it to you. You're our expert on this, but I have to express a little bit of I guess, disappointment that 10 years later we're finally almost there. We, in my opinion, could have been here sooner. But anyways, that's crying over spilt milk. Merci again, Ryan. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. Any other questions? No. So, merci beaucoup, Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Madame la Greffière.
Up next is CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund, additional funding allocation, and Josh Davies will be presenting.
Yes. Yeah, so the purpose of the presentation today is to seek approval from Moncton City Council in terms of the allocation of recently received additional Housing Accelerator Fund money. So in terms of, I guess, the background, we did receive additional funding following the first year of our reporting, which was very successful. The city did very well in terms of trying to reach its targets, providing updates on its various initiatives, and felt like we were in a very good place. We also were able to submit an additional initiative. As Council recalls, last year we brought forward the business improvement area infill policy. So that was submitted as an additional initiative to CMHC for their review, and they agreed and thought that was similar to to what we've been dealing with to date, is made annually. So we received an installment this year with 2 more to follow, approximately $440,000 per year. And in order to allocate the funds, we did put together a draft budget for Council's review. And this was undertaken through the Interdepartmental Housing Accelerator Fund Committee. So in terms of the allocations, we're looking at in terms of planning for additional staff support of approximately $220,000. And it's important to remember that this is over that 3-year period, like I mentioned. Looking at contingencies for the municipal plan, as we just presented, it's a big file, it's a big project, and there may be more costs or more initiatives that we need to undertake as part of that work to really bring the plan to life. Wrapping up things with the vision lands, we're at the point now where we're getting close to a finalized draft documents. However, there are other initiatives, other things such as the Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund, other items where we may need some funding in order to get the plan completed and pursue those next stages of development for that area. Master planning. So we have a lot of interest from landowners in other parts of the city who may have an interest in working with other landowners to master plan some larger swaths of land. Right now, I guess as council knows, the planning department and team is very busy in terms of its work, and this funding could be used again as on an as-needed basis to tackle some of these bigger projects that right now in-house are becoming a little bit more difficult for us to manage, given some of the other projects that we're working on. In addition, looking at our grant programs, it's a very good problem to have. However, our additional dwelling unit grant program was capped in 1 year. So we had looked at those 30 applications, and luckily all of them were snapped up in year 1. So we're proposing an additional 26 grants to the total of $260,000 for the additional dwelling unit grant program. Similarly, our Growth Areas Grant Program, which revolves around new housing units in development charge areas, we're looking at a top-up of $200,000 for that program. For our nonprofit housing grant program, $180,000, which would equate to approximately 9 new doors at $20,000 per door. Sorry, Vision Land's there twice. Apologies for that. In terms of another study that we're looking at and trying to, again, figure out the flexibility and how we can try to really come up with as many housing solutions as we can, knowing that the housing issue is certainly not one that's going to go away. We're looking at a heritage analysis and enabling through this type of study and report how we can achieve more in density within some of our existing heritage buildings. So they may be commercial buildings, they may be residential buildings, with the idea of maintaining the character of the buildings, what makes them a heritage building. How can we work with property owners that may be looking to increase or provide some more density? So this was a study that we would be looking at there in terms of the allocation. So the recommendation is that Moncton City Council approve the proposed allocation of additional CMHC Housing Accelerator funds, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Merci, Josh. We have a motion, so could I have a mover and a seconder? Conseiller Leblanc, Conseiller Léger. So we will go to the questions. Conseiller, oh, you made a mover. Est-ce que je envoie pas maintenant? Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la maire. Merci, Josh. Le conseiller Légère et moi-même, on a rencontré un groupe MCRI ce matin,
Yep.
Moncton Community Residences, I think, and they have a project, and they were looking for assistance from the city, potentially half funding, potentially land. We'll let them propose whatever it is that they deem fit.
Yeah.
But as I'm looking through the way that you plan to distribute that funding, in principle, great idea. But a question is, first one, planning additional staffing support, $220,000. This funding over a 3-year period will be used as needed to assist in addressing departmental gaps and pressures. So intervening in affordable housing. I just mentioned MCRI. Will this staff, and what they need is in part business plans and designs and that kind of stuff. Will that $220,000, the staff paid for by that $220,000, will they be not only reserved to the corporation, your department, but would they also help the NGOs perform their work?
Yeah, I think in my current role, and as I guess as I've evolved in my time with the city, that's sort of what I've been doing, is helping the nonprofits sort of get off the ground. A lot of work with Rising Tide, but also a lot of work with Housing for Life, Sister Cormier, Youth Impact. There's quite a few meetings that we take and try to get everyone to the front of the line, so I'm very familiar with Andrea and the work that she's doing. I think what we may find through the nonprofits specifically is the $16 million allocation that we received. But again, I think what we'll look at in terms of having that contingency is whether it may be a contract planner. There's no shortage of work for that type of individual to work on. So whether it's freeing up capacity for someone like me or bringing someone in that has a specific expertise or focus on the subject that we need to explore, that's what we would be able to use that funding for. But with respect to the other nonprofits, we'll be topping up the nonprofit Perdor grant program as well. So I think in combination for the community.
The city doesn't have a housing authority, so we don't build houses. We
Correct.
rely on Rising Tide and MCRI and other groups to do it, right? So I'll rephrase my question. How do we help them if it's just meeting with these organizations? Great, you help them along, you provide the useful information, but if they need to do a feasibility study for a project, for instance, is any of this money, or instead of hiring private firms to do feasibility study, staff would do it for them?
Not directly, no, but but I think the biggest thing that the city can do from a planning and from I guess a corporate perspective is that surplus land strategy. So if we're able to free up land, that's often the biggest barrier that a lot of these nonprofits like MCRI have into actually getting things to happen. So I think at the end of the day, like if we did have if they're doing is providing the flexibility to address the gaps that we're going to be facing over the next 3 years on a variety of projects, but again, coming through, if that's what we need to come forward in terms of explaining how we're going to use that money as those needs arise, we can certainly come to council for that as well.
So if a group like MCRI comes to the city for help, they want to do feasibility studies?
That's a Perdor grant program for the actual construction. But again, like if that's I guess part of the reason why we're here today is that if there was a wish to allocate more funding to the soft cost grant program, because they can effectively then use a consultant, or they can go out into the community and hire someone to help them with their feasibility study. From a land use perspective, from a building design standpoint, planning can really help. But where we do help is in terms of helping them identify the right parcel of land, understanding their project in terms of what zoning they need to be looking for, approximately what type of size they might need to accommodate. And I think as well, the city's done a good job in terms of its zoning bylaw amendments. So you'll recall that we had changed the cash in lieu of parking policy so that nonprofits could effectively buy spaces that they were not able to accommodate on their properties. So there's a few things that again in this funding to have more soft cost grant program funding available to nonprofits.
Okay, I'm not happy with there may be funds available. Why don't we take, there's 55,000 that would remain from the total budget, add another 45 to it, and tell the groups like MCRI and others, listen, they're busy enough doing their job that for them to launch a unit development, 20 units or whatever it is that they need to build, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the wherewithal they will come to you, you make suggestions, you give them information, but to do the legwork.
Yes.
And I'm using a feasibility study, but it might be a architectural design or whatever, they don't have that money, or maybe they do, but they don't know how to proceed. So
Sure.
would it be wise for the organizations, the NGOs out there who are going to do the real work, so that we can help them fund the research and legwork that they need to come to us afterwards for HAF funding or whatever it is that they need?
Yeah, I think, and again, that's why I think it's probably the benefit as to why we're here. So I think we had put that original budget together in terms of the allocation, $100,000 available for the soft costs. Again, to your point, $20,000 per project. We can certainly do that as well.
All right, I'll let the other ones, because other members of council, and then I'll come back probably with an amendment to the motion to that effect. Thank you very much for your information, Josh. Appreciate it. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, conseiller Bourgeois, conseiller Légère.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Merci, Josh. Juste pour venir, donc, peut-être expliquer pourquoi.
The main reason why the soft cost program was launched at the initial outset of the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan was because CMHC had pulled seed funding at the time. So we felt that by kind of replacing that on our end for 5 projects was a worthy venture. Since that time, the seed funding has then, my understanding is that the seed funding has then reopened. So my understanding is that it is still open, it is still operating. Again, we felt a good use of that money was. I think a lot of the nonprofits that started, we think we have 1 to 2 applications for looking for soft cost assistance. So the first 4 or 5 nonprofits that we know that are pretty busy and looking to get moving came through. So there hasn't been as much knocking on the door for the soft cost grant versus the per door grant programs versus some of the other, I guess, good pressures that we have with a lot of this funding that certainly can do so. The program exists. It would just be a matter of topping it up.
So do you think that not-for-profits are aware that the seed money from CMHC is currently available?
I mean, I would hope so. I think they typically have their own contacts between the nonprofits and CMHC. But again, if we ever have any questions that are coming through to us around those respects, we try to send every available to assist, and then trying to point them into other directions if there are other information available for the other levels of government.
And does the way the seed money works, was it 100% funded by CMHC, or was it contingent on some of the soft cost funding that we had?
Yeah, well, so the original soft cost funding, the original $100,000 came from the CMHC. It was it was fully funded through CMHC and implemented by the city through the policy, the soft cost grant policy.
So now is it no longer administered by the city? It's just administered through CMHC?
The 5 that we had, sorry, those are the 5 that we had were administered through the money that was received from the federal government through Housing Accelerator Fund. CMHC, my understanding is they came back forward with their seed funding as an open program that they would openly administer. In this case, it may be that they would be able to stack what they could get through a soft cost or seed funding through the feds, and if it is council's desire to add
some perhaps. And maybe it's you, but a direct link so that not-for-profits know who to speak to and somebody who can direct them the right way. That's not sort of the impression that I got today in the meeting that was referred to, but I just would like some clarity and don't necessarily want to duplicate. So if the soft costs are available, then there would be no need for us to do that. But if we're not sure that the soft costs are available, then it may be wise. I don't like just doing things on short notice. So what would be your suggestion in terms of where because I think there would be interest in terms of making sure that soft costs are available. That's why Sister Cormier's projects, what Councillor Bourgeois mentioned.
What I would say is, I mean, at the end of the day, I think any more additional soft costs, any funding that is available to nonprofits generally is going to help them. I think $20,000 to get a project off the ground is not going to be, it's going to probably be more than $20,000 by the time they get into all those related fees. So I guess every active list as groups come on or as groups that are established with nonprofit housing, we can put out a communication to let them know that, I guess if successful, that the nonprofit per door grant program, the number has been increased, and if it's council's desire to add again another $100,000, if that's what it is, that we can let them know about that. In that part, between that time between preparing the email and sending it out, is to just reaffirm with CMHC that the seed funding is available, and kind of help them point in other directions, whether it's the province through social development and RDC. There are soft cost grant programs there, and I would say that most nonprofits that are looking to construct often call CMHC first because they typically have that big relationship, whether it's financing or previous relationships between federal government and any other resources that we have available to include in a communication so that they're all getting the same message at the same time.
I think what would be nice would be, first of all, to know what the maximum amount of seed funding is available through CMHC. Yeah. Secondly, if the amount, then I think it would help us decide whether or not the soft costs is available, or we allocate the soft costs, and if you come back later and say we can't use it or whatever, I guess
Yeah, I think
Just sort of trying to
I think I
figure
can
this
answer
out.
that question as well. So I think at the end of the day, the amount in terms of the funding and the budget into the missing middle BIA, the group we meet monthly on the permits and the grants, but we could also have a focused meeting in terms of looking at the funding allocation and making sure more generally we're happy with the budget. There may be some other funding from the existing $15.5 million that we come forward with the answers around that 100,000 and make sure that we know it's stackable. My understanding is that it is, but again, we can reaffirm those questions and come back to council and confirm.
Another question I have is, so what, we do all of this, but do we put any timelines?
Timelines with respect to the grants?
So the feasibility, so they do the feasibility study.
Yeah.
They do all of this, and then is there a timeline given that things need to move forward in the next year?
Yeah.
Anything along that line?
The foundation is in the ground. So that means that, like, for the Perdor grant programs, it's a more of an assurity that if the foundation is in the ground, everything is moving along, then the project is started. Soft costs are a little bit tougher because every nonprofit is a little different. So what we did in the first to disperse the funds for new nonprofits that haven't been around as much, for example, Sister Cormier, is that they actually needed to come through with their building permit and then were able to show us receipts, which was all part of the policy, to show how some of that money was spent. And then the money would be allocated after the fact. So I guess to answer your question, the soft cost one is a little bit harder to track because of that, trying to get these projects off the ground, but I don't think we would be able to tie them in terms of you must have a permit within a certain amount of time, because there are a lot of things outside of our control that may impact that from meeting those target deadlines.
So if I understand correctly, then the Housing for Life, which is Sister Cormier, now
Yeah.
that they have the foundation,
Yes.
then they will be receiving the $20,000 per door as a way to move their.
Yeah. So I guess to walk through that project at a high level, the $20,000 would have been allocated through the soft costs, and then also I believe Sister Cormier, it's 15 doors that she's building.
Or 15
Yeah, I
doors,
think it's 50. Yeah, so whatever it is, it's $20K per door. So I think she's in line for approximately $320,000 with that 15 doors and the soft costs. The city contribution through the Housing Accelerator Fund would be approximately $320,000. In addition to, we were able to help her find the land appropriately zoned, site plan design, putting them at the front of the line to make sure that they're getting their permits in an orderly time so that they can move along in their process. Yeah, that's shown how it can go from soft costs all the way through to construction in terms of how it's working as it was intended.
Yeah, okay, and I think would be important.
And we can certainly, whether it's through, again, we can, if it's decided that the funding wants to be allocated today, we can even just put an email back to council once we find out our answers from our colleagues in CMHC to reaffirm any of those points. We can certainly do that.
I have another question. You may not have an answer for it, but maybe when you're discussing the land disposition, that land should be developed. And that's problematic now when we're discussing vacant lots as we discuss a city council. But we have had situations where we have disposed of public land and a number of years ago now, and nothing has happened on that land.
Yeah.
And so we need to have some assurance, and we need to figure out what's going on. If we've done all of this and nothing has happened, all of that,
Yeah.
and do what we intended it to do in the first place, which is affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah. I can, I guess, understanding there is a clause, but I think the file that we're referring to now, that permit is coming in within the coming weeks to get started. But I would say on the surplus land strategy is that knowing that implementation, if again it's a strategy that we can have, and if council wishes to proceed with it, we can certainly have and I can work with the team to make sure that as part of that strategy, that the implementation makes sure that we're covered to get that land back and make sure that the appropriate conditions are in place to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. But that file, I think you'll see the permit will be issued this year. It's just, and again, we're working with our partners to make sure that again, trying to reduce the variances, trying to make sure that it's as close to the letter of the law, the bylaw can be. So that one will be on its way as well.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah,
because
agreed.
I'm not interested in going through clear that the process is difficult enough.
Yes.
And so there needs to be that commitment that this will happen. So
Yeah, I'll stress that in terms of
Appreciate
the report. Yeah, no trouble. Thank you.
thank you. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Léger. Conseiller Crossman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Josh, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it. A couple questions. One of them I was a little off center, I guess, on. I didn't see the soft cost that you were talking about in the report, so I'm not familiar with that in some way or shape or form. In the planning and additional staffing support, 220,000. This is a 3-year agreement, and then after that, these become employees of the city of Moncton, and they will be worked into the city budget. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. I think in some cases we've been able to use contracts, so maybe to retain a planner for a certain amount of numbers. I don't think you would see this funding be allocated for positions that would then become permanent. Okay. They would be used in terms of 3 to 6 month type projects where maybe it might be a combination of $40,000 to $50,000 contracts that we need to kind of help us keep moving some of these important initiatives along. But I would not foresee them being contracts with the idea of them becoming full-time positions later. I think it would be mostly used for contract assistance where needed on the various initiatives the department's working on.
Okay, good. And I appreciate that. I really do, because I wasn't sure, and nowhere in the CRF did I see that they were going to be permanent or anything like that, so I figured I'd ask the question.
Yep.
You also had a affordable nonprofit housing grant program up to 180,000 for 9 additional doors. Do we have to actually put a cap on the amount of doors and the amount spent per door? And the reason why I ask this is because we're starting nonprofits and what they're doing in housing in Fredericton. And it seems to be less. If I look at Mr. LeBrun's project, some of his projects that he announces, he just announced one with the City of St. John where he's partnering, could be less than $20,000 a door. Do we have to put that specific amount on there?
I think it's valuable from an administrative standpoint and looking at the type of construction, I guess, that was anticipated. So in terms of whether it's a rising tide or the example of Housing for Life or Youth Impact, they're more the apartment style structures as opposed to the smaller model like the 12 Neighbors community is using. So generally speaking, from an administrative standpoint, if we were able to put a dollar amount per door, then I guess it is easier to manage, but it does not stop the nonprofits, I guess, from applying. If it's 15 doors, they could be eligible for up to $30,000, or sorry, $300,000. And you could, again, if this type of project were to come forward, and the city would like to support it.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out that there's a difference in housing, right?
That's right.
And Monday night we had Tuesday night we had a presentation where there is starting housing, right, where we're getting the people off of the street, getting them out of the crisis that they're in.
Yeah.
Versus what Rising Tide is doing or what other initiatives are doing. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we help our community and help the people that are living on the street.
It's a good question, and I guess it would be something to consider and maybe take away and report back on. But a lot of the CMHC, the Housing Accelerator Fund requirement is around units, right? So what is a unit? So I would not be certain that the smaller, whether it's a container style or that sort of, and again, you're saying like that next step of housing out of homelessness, I'm not sure if they would qualify in terms of meeting the full definition of housing units. But the other nonprofit units that we have in the existing program, they do, because they're coming in for their building permits. It's kind of, I guess I would say it's new territory for us and for municipalities in general with these smaller type communities. So to answer your question, I think on the traditional side of things, that's kind of the path we've taken with respect to the unit counts and what CMHC expect, pallet housing it might be, that we could entertain those conversations and come back to council with some form of a recommendation.
Okay, I don't want to lose sight of what was said Tuesday night where that first housing is not available, right? It's very limited. It's not accessible for the people to get actually off the street, get out of the communities, get away from their crisis, and make the community feel safer. So that's why I asked my question.
Yeah, and we can certainly contact CMHC and ask how they might treat that in terms of a unit count, and we'll do our homework and make sure that we're coming back with an informed recommendation.
Okay, great, thank you. And I had one more question. The council contingency is always available for additional funding that we could put towards, such as the 2 projects that Councillor Bourgeois and Leger talked about too, right? They could make a motion and withdraw that money from the council contingency to put towards additional groups. Jacques, would that be correct? I'm assuming there's quite a bit of money in there as well. Is that correct? Okay, no idea how much?
Thank you, Your Worship. From my recollection, and again, there's a couple of items that have not been finalized, but I don't think any amount from this year has been used as of now.
Okay, good, great, thank you, Jacques, I appreciate that. And just one thing in closing, I guess, the only thing I can say, Josh, is I'll wait and see where Councillor Bourgeois moves on his possible amendment to the motions. I was thinking about adding 25,000 into heritage. The reason why I say that is the fact that all the heritage buildings are, well, most of them are within the downtown core, within the BIA. And we've done such a great job at cleaning up our BIA. We've done a great job of partnering with businesses and developments within the BIA. I thought that this would be another opportunity to bring our heritage forward, you know, with the additional funding. So I'll wait and see where that goes, but I can tell you right now that if all this extra 55,000 is spent today or differently allocated today and there is none available, I'll probably work on something with Jacques for the council contingency to up
Top it
that.
up, sure.
Yeah, so
Yep,
just
sure.
so you know and
Nope.
staff know.
That's great.
Okay, good, thank you, Your Worship, I appreciate it.
Merci, Conseiller Crossman. If there is no other question from colleagues, I will go to Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Thanks for the discussion as well. I guess the difference, just to come back to Councillor Crossman's idea, it's a very good idea, but the contingency, we don't necessarily spend it. So taxpayers would save money that we don't spend from that fund. We can, and I think as a last recourse, we could do that. But here we have 1.3 million, okay, to divvy up over 3 years. And this is what staff proposes. And I think we've had enough discussion whether we increase 25,000 from that 1.3 million for heritage and take another 45,000 from little bits and pieces here, or 10,000 here, 5,000 there, to have 100,000 ready for the NGOs, because we receive the one, so that's a nuance, I guess, for you to consider. But me, I want to divvy up the 1.3 where council thinks it's best. What I'm afraid of is that, let's say Habitat for Humanity, I'm not sure they're still operating, but they have the Restore, so I'm not sure if they're still building houses, but they did formerly in Ward 3 close to the Coliseum, where a city gave up land and they put up the money to build, and we got it done. If Habitat came back to council and said, all right, we have the land, we don't need city land, but we need to do a feasibility study or architectural designs, or there's we have to tear down the building or whatever, we need 20, 25,000, we don't have that money. Is there any way, or come back to the MCRI project, that they need to do X, Y, Z, whatever? Is there any way through the existing répartition of the funds that you have?
I think we can, and I think maybe to an earlier point that we had from Councilor Legier's question is that, again, if this is approved today, we're always meeting and making sure that we're spending this budget and that there's not a bunch of unused funds that we get to in year 4 where we're left with a slush fund, right? We don't want that to happen. So what I would suggest is that, again, these policies, they all exist today. We don't need to change them. Is that if there is an additional direction to find $100,000 to put into the soft cost grant program through the existing $15.5 million plus this 1.3, we could certainly find a way to do that. Again, it's just a matter of meeting with the committee, meeting with finance to make sure that we find it, and we can certainly come back to council with that. Or if there's a direction to find, again, the 100,000 out of this 1.3, I think both situations are possible. But again, we'll be looking at those funds and try to spend every dollar that we have to get this moving.
Worst case scenario, somebody has a great project, cannot go ahead, right? So because we are bound by strict rules or regulations. So as long as you tell me that Habitat for Humanity or MCRI or any other NGO can come in and access these funds to do their soft.
Yeah, to a limit. So I think that's why we would need to allocate. If the direction is to find $100,000 to allocate to that fund, because then we go out to the NGOs and say, we have 5 projects at $20,000 a piece to put out to you, because it would not be sort of the ad hoc where if they're coming in off the street and there's 10 or 12 of them, we might not have $250,000 to provide. But if we do get out in advance and make clear what it is, if it's 5 projects at $20,000 a door, then we would go out to the nonprofits, as I mentioned, in a communication. And for those who have not already received it, so there's 5 that already have, that the remaining nonprofit groups such as MCRI, and I'm sure there are others who are interested, could then, they know, they can come forward, apply, and we can take their applications and help them on the way.
And you could have criteria, for instance.
And we do already. Yeah, it's
maximum
already in the
20 or
policy today.
25.
That's right.
If project, to avoid duplication, if there is
Yeah.
funding available from CMHC, or if the funding, so my final question before making potentially an amendment is this rush for today? Can we wait till the next committee, the whole meeting, or council meeting of next Monday? Is it too late for that?
I think there's probably a way to make sure that we can get that, we can find that extra $100,000. So perhaps and I might turn it over to Nick or others to say, we can find that extra $100,000 and make sure that it's allocated, and we can report back to council again, because we don't need to change a policy. We don't need to change any of those things. If it ends up being that perhaps the recommendation is slightly amended to say with the direction of finding another $100,000 and putting that back out to the nonprofits, we can certainly accomplish that today and without having to come back to council.
Yeah, and if it's not spent if there's no demand or demand.
That's right, because we'll be coming back to council anyway with a report on any recommended budget changes or funding changes later this year.
I'll leave Councillor Crossman make a modification to the heritage, but for me, there's already 55,000 available, like a leftover balance of approximately 55,000. It wouldn't be going out to get 100,000, it'd be about 45,000.
Yeah.
But the goal would be to have a line item there somewhere, 100,000 for assistance to NGOs.
Yep.
It's not internal to the organization. We are reaching out, partnering the best way we can with the NGOs who don't have the HR capacity to do some of these things, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No, I think we can comfortably find that 100,000 and then and make it work. Yeah. No trouble.
So directive of staff would be good enough?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're just in committee of the whole today. So if council's comfortable with us finding that extra 45,000, we can just amend the budget, and when we bring this back for ratification next Monday, we can have that separate line item, and council can review that budget and make sure that you're okay with it. Correct.
Okay, I'll let Councillor Crossman add something to it. I'm fine, thank you, appreciate it. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. So we do have a motion that's been moved and seconded, so we'll go to an electronic.
Hearing the conversation going around the room, the 100,000 is great. Where does this put the 25 possible $1,000 for the Heritage Group?
To a total of 100,000.
It's within the 100.
Yeah, so I guess to answer your question, Councillor Crosman, if the direction is that we're going to find the 100,000 for the soft cost and 25,000 through to top up the heritage,
yes,
we can achieve both. We're going to have to do that at the same meeting regardless. So I think we'll come back with a solution for both, if that's council's direction.
Okay, so I don't need to make an amendment. Nothing along that line. The direction according to today's CAO is fine enough.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right.
And that will include the 25 for Heritage. That's good.
That's right. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be coming back if there is any recommended changes through other parts of the budget, through the larger commitment that we've already been receiving, then we'll be coming forward with any recommended changes with relating to funding or anything that we feel will help us move housing further. We'll be coming back to council with a more fulsome report and recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Merci, Conseiller Crossman, so we can go to the vote. It's an electronic vote, is that correct? Merci, motion carried. Merci à tous. Merci,
Thank you.
Josh. Merci, colleagues. Madame la greffière.
Up next is contractor management policy. Angela Cornett is here to.
Thank you.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor and members of council. We're here to present on a contractor management policy for your consideration and approval. This policy will ensure that all contractors working with the city, regardless of the department or type of work, will be held to consistent safety and performance standards. Is this a swipe? Sorry. New. Just tap.
Hit down.
I'm sorry.
Because it's a PDF.
Oh. Sorry, that was my fault. All right, sorry. As part of our recent review of our health and safety directive, a gap analysis identified the need for a coordinated citywide contractor management approach. Currently, departments operate independently with inconsistent processes and expectations. Research into best practices and review of recent legal rulings helped guide this policy into its creation. Levels of risk, from IS support to snow clearing and road reconstructions. Our health and safety specialist has witnessed unsafe work and in some cases has had to stop work to address safety concerns. In response, we formed a cross-departmental working group to work on this policy with representatives from purchasing, legal, human resources, strategic initiatives, engineering, and operations. This collaborative approach ensured the policy reflects both operational realities and legislative requirements while also in supporting citywide alignment. The policy highlights the expectations for contractors within 4 main key phases: prior to contract award, prior to commencement of work, performance monitoring and quality control, and post-contract performance evaluation. Requirements may include requirements. The policy also gives the city the ability to ask for additional information or documentation prior to the commencement of work, such as criminal record checks or driver's abstract, depending on the type of work or the location or environment that the work is being completed. The policy covers the city's minimum worksite compliance and performance requirements for work performed by all third-party contractors. This can include around health and safety measures, corrective discipline, and worksite responsibilities might not be addressed. The policy will be included in tender packages going forward. The contractor management policy was modeled after the existing contractor management safety program used by our engineering department. It highlights the requirements necessary for high-risk work completed by contractors, but the language used allows for the policy to be applied to all contractors where applicable. The primary objectives of the policy are to ensure that all contractors operate in full compliance with health and safety regulations and minimize the city's liability and risk exposure. Help create consistency within the organization. As mentioned, each department currently manages their contracts in silos, which means contractors' interactions can be different with the city depending on which department they're working for. With this policy, we want to ensure that our standards and expectations are clear in all capacities. Lastly, with the implementation of this policy, we're hoping to continue to enhance our safety culture within the organization and help empower employees to report and enforce health and safety violations witnessed on all city worksites. Directors for review in early 2025. Comments were incorporated into the policy where applicable. The policy was also reviewed by members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to ensure language is used that's not outdated and that it's inclusive. The policy was then presented and approved by the Leadership Management Committee, or team, in early May. Once the policy is approved, we plan to work with corporate communications to develop a strategy to inform that employees administer and enforce the policy. And there is also a potential need for funding or internal resources to acquire technology that can help city staff manage contractors, which will align with our movement away from paper-based practices. There are several contractor management systems out in the market. However, for the time being, we hope to use city applications or internal forms to get us started in the meantime. Culture within the city. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Nous avons une motion, donc est-ce que je peux avoir quelqu'un pour proposer et appuyer? Conseiller Légère, conseiller Bourgeois, est-ce que vous l'appuyez? Oui, c'est beau. Merci. Donc, sur les questions, donc, conseiller Légère.
Merci, Madame la Mairesse. Thanks for the presentation. I think it's a very good step in terms of standardization. One thing that I would like to have considered is on the various job sites that are being conducted around the city. Everyone is wearing safety vests. Could we insist that the name of the contractor be on the vest? He visually thinks that these might all be City of Moncton employees. And so I think, and plus, if there is an incident, then or a complaint, then the general public has an idea as to which contracting company is involved. Would that be a reasonable request?
I think so. Rick, is that?
Oh,
Do you want to come
yeah,
up?
have to go. Oh,
Do you want to come up?
for consideration.
Good afternoon. Certainly a great question for them to make that decision.
So before we approve the policy, though, I think this will come back, correct? So that we'll have an opportunity, because I think that's really important. In the years that I've been on council, it's continual, where people see a variety of different people who are involved in a construction site and immediately focuses on this has to be a city project, and they're all there standing around not doing anything. So I think visually that would be very important. So I just sort of put that out there. And secondly, what I'd like to see is some standard, if this is a policy, some standardization in and around some construction projects. We have a very good track record onto who is responsible for which particular project. Hopefully we can come back with some standardization so that we're all on the same page, and maybe that's built in there, the requirement before the request or the tender or the RFP is put out. So just some things operationally, but these are the things that people have expressed in the past, and I believe that this is a great step forward if we can add a few more steps.
That's a very valid point. To speak to your last point, we can include that in the directive that will follow this policy. The policy, of course, is the forward-facing information.
Yeah.
The directive will be how we perform it, how our supervisors actually enact the steps.
Yeah, okay, that would be great. And also if people have, because a lot of times if people have concerns, they're either going to reach out to city councilors perhaps, or they may call dispatch, admitted, and there's a way to sort of do that feedback.
Tanya, is having identification of the contractors on site something that you want to speak to, or? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci, conseiller Léger, conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la maire. Poser une question en français?
Si tu veux, oui.
OK. La ville de Moncton est officiellement bilingue. On est imposé par la loi sur les langues officielles du Nouveau-Brunswick d'offrir des services dans les deux langues de façon égale. J'ai regardé, j'ai juste lu une fois, mais la politique ou l'ébauche de la politique, très bon job, mais j'ai rien vu des langues officielles parce que nous, comme ville de Moncton, si on embauche des contractants, d'après la loi, les contractants ont les mêmes obligations que la ville de Moncton. Peut-être pas dans toutes les matières, je ne suis pas un expert dans ça, mais j'ai rien vu. Est-ce que j'ai manqué quelque chose qui parle des langues officielles dans la politique? J'ai rien vu.
No, I don't think it's, we did discuss it as a group. I don't believe it's something, it would be something that would be required on a contractor-to-contractor basis. So it depends what work they're doing. It would be written in their, in the tender, if there's a tender that goes out. If it's a one-time basis, it would be the same as us. If they're public-facing, we're going to make sure that they're bilingual. If it's, road work or something, it doesn't necessarily matter what language.
So it's required elsewhere, but not necessarily by this policy?
No. Tanya, did you?
I just want services in French or in English of equal quality. So if we don't require it through this policy, but we require it to other mechanisms, I'll be fine. But I'm just curious as to why we don't repeat it here.
I can answer that. So we do require it on, I mean, we will put it into agreements as required, tenders as required. So it's more, when we have a service that we need that for, we do put it in. So it is covered elsewhere.
Okay, perfect. So we don't need to have, you have it amongst your, moi j'ai la version française, la ville se réserve de demander à l'entrepreneur des renseignements et des documents supplémentaires avant le début des travaux, y compris, sans toutefois s'y limiter, confirmation de vérification du casier judiciaire, capacité de travailler dans le secteur vulnérable, contrôle de l'immigration, etc., le dossier de conducteur d'automobile. Est-ce qu'on demanderait un certificat de compétences linguistiques des personnes? Si, par exemple, il y a un projet de construction, Puis il doit y avoir quelqu'un avec une affiche là, avec diriger le trafic. S'ils ne sont pas capables de parler en anglais ou en français, puis c'est pas demandé dans cette liste de vérification-là, il pourrait arriver puis parler un français que personne ne comprend parce que c'est un français ou un anglais que personne ne comprend.
I wasn't sure if Isabel was going to respond to that as the former Director of Corporate Communications, but
I don't really own the file anymore. Typically, anything that is signage, on leur demanderait d'avoir des enseignes bilingues. On a déjà reproché à des entreprises qui avaient des affiches unilingues. On leur a embauché des fournisseurs pour faire leur flagging, qu'on appelle en bon français. À ce niveau-là, j'aurais aucune idée s'ils embauchent des gens bilingues. Par contre, ce qui est affichage, sur les sites de construction, ça doit être bilingue, absolument.
Mais on a l'obligation de fournir nos communications ou les communications qu'un contractant fournit en notre nom dans les deux langues officielles de qualité égale. So, on ne vérifie pas ça, on n'exige pas ça.
Parce que les ouvriers comme tels sur le site, évidemment, ils n'ont aucune interaction avec le public. Ça serait vraiment juste ceux qui ont des affiches pour diriger la circulation.
Ceux-là qui ont l'affiche vont peut-être te dire, quelqu'un va poser la question, je viens-tu à gauche, je viens-tu à droite?
Oui. Donc, c'est cette personne-là. Je ne sais pas si Tania, tu as d'autres renseignements sur ce que les contracteurs sont capables d'offrir.
so I'll try to answer this question as best I can. So as Nick said, where we have specific contracts that have a requirement for the individual speaking personnel, and that those personnel will be appointed to key areas of, or key locations, or anything where the likelihood of them interacting with the public is likely to happen. Isabel is correct as well that any signage or any public-facing communication, documents, signage, anything in writing, has to be provided by the contractor in both official languages as well. So any written media, whatever you want to call it. However, on one-off jobs or jobs that are not personnel would have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. However, by default, it is not a requirement for a contractor's staff to be bilingual.
Well, that's fine. I don't want everybody to be bilingual. I just want two things. One is, and if I understand Nick correctly, it's in the agreement or the contract.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in the policy. I got that.
Correct, yes.
License. That's certified, that has been certified, that that person can drive a car because the government of New Brunswick issued a driver's license. How do we verify that the person that is supposed to be bilingual is actually bilingual?
It's not something we ask for today, but it is certainly something we could include within that list. And the list that's there is not meant to be all-encompassing. Again, it gives us the latitude to request any additional proof or evidence or certificates as we see fit, as it's applicable to the scope of work. So that is absolutely something if the person that is hiring the contractor, the city department, or the person in charge of the program, or whatever you want to call it, felt that it was absolutely necessary for someone to have a certain level of certification in terms of their French language skills. The language in that policy gives us the latitude to ask for that.
Could have been brought to justice, and we would be on the principle of not being liable. So I'll leave it at that. Take that into consideration, maybe ask the province or the Commissioner of Official Languages, saying, are we meeting with the legislation on official languages? Are we good here? And if so, I have no problem. I just want to avoid anybody taking the city to court for not providing quality service in English, quality service in French, to citizens. So I'll leave it at that. We're good? Thank you. Merci, Madame la Maire. Merci, Tania.
Merci, conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Richard.
Merci, Mayor Stereo. I just wanted to add on to basically to what Councillor Bourgeois was saying. So the in your presentation, you mentioned using some technology. So basically a contractor management platform, maybe?
Yes.
And you've already been looking into that. I use that every day, so.
Right, not fully at this time. We've had a few demos, a few different things, but we're hoping we can work internally with simple forms and online tasks just to get us started, to get the basic framework in place. Once we're established, we're hoping we can get down and maybe get something a little bit more concrete, and request for funding or something would come at that time if we seem that that's necessary.
Because those platforms, those contractor management platforms, had a lot of the information that he was asking for at the forefront, and it's shared with all contractors or like the cities and stuff like that. So, yeah. Merci.
Merci, Conseiller Richard. We have a motion that's been moved and seconded. We'll go to the vote, electronic vote. Merci, a motion carried. Donc, merci à tous. Madame la greffière.
Up next is Event Street Closure, Moncton Wildcats 2024-2025 season celebration for June 2nd, 2025. And Shane Porter's here.
Good afternoon, Deputy Mayor, members of council. So I think I don't really have to explain the season that the Moncton Wildcats have had this year. We all know that it's been an exceptional year for the Cats. And it's very customary for cities to do some kind of public event or acknowledgement at the end of season. So our events crew, our events team have been working on just that, a celebration for the Moncton Wildcats when appropriate. We've been working with the Wildcats head office to try and figure out the best timing for this. That being a week from today, next Monday, where we would be able to capture the entire team and coaching staff before they head off to other duties or to go home. So Monday was the preferred by the Wildcats for all of those good reasons. And what we're asking today, on top of the celebration planned for the plaza at the Avenir Center, is to do a parade, a public march, if you will, with the trophy that they do have now as the champs for the Quebec Major Junior League. If everything goes according to plan, then maybe they'll be celebrating and walking with 2 trophies that night, we hope. So I guess the ask today is very simply on the subject of street closure. In order to do this properly, we need a couple of hours to get the street closed properly, make it safe for that parade to occur. The parade is set to go from City Hall here in the plaza, where they would meet and muster, and then march up to the Avenir Center Plaza. And where we'd have some festivities and activities for children, food trucks, we'd get a player autograph session and a real chance for the public and the fans to, congratulate the team. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and go from there. Thank you.
Merci, Shane. Conseiller Bourgeois, do you wish to move the motion? So I'm waiting for the light. Conseiller Bourgeois is trying.
Yes, I do, but I'd like to modify it.
Okay. C'est beau.
So I will probably read the modification.
Oui, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. As is there, and that City Council's regularly scheduled public meeting be postponed until the Tuesday, June 3rd. And we close this street too much complications for people. I'd rather we move the council meeting to Tuesday, June 3rd.
So so how do we do this? We modify the motion?
I can move whatever I want, and I just did.
Okay.
So if nobody seconds it, that's fine.
Conseiller Butler, do you wish to second? Okay.
As of now, we have no public hearings scheduled for that evening. There are some public presentations. We have our agenda review meeting tomorrow morning. We will finalize the agenda. It's a light agenda so far. But if council wishes to change the date to the Tuesday, you can do that also. It's up to you, but there are no public hearings that would be affected if we were to proceed Monday.
But for the sake of democracy, people wanting to attend city council, that would be a complication. But if council wants to remain meeting on the 2nd, that's fine. They can take that away from the motion that I just made. But I'll stick to the two together. We can divide the motion if you want, but.
So Conseiller Bourgeois, would you read your motion again, please?
Yeah, okay. That Moncton City Council approve the temporary event street closure as outlined in the background section of the council report form to allow the event to proceed as planned, and that council displace its June 2nd meeting to June 3rd.
C'est beau. Conseiller Butler, you wish to second that? C'est beau. Donc, it's been moved and seconded. Do we go to the...
Shane, thanks for the presentation, short and brief, love it. Although the parade's not going to be.
No, it will not.
No, it will not. Just so I'm clear and the public understands this will be a walking parade from City Hall all the way to the Avenir Center?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and the businesses along Main Street have been contacted, everybody's on board?
Through DMCI, they will be notified, yes.
They will be notified, okay, good. And then, just add a little bit more, Shane, if you don't mind, to what was going to be going on in the Oval?
Sure. I guess if you think back to what we were hosting during World Juniors, for example, so I don't want to promise that exactly, but that concept. So we will have, food options, drink options for people there. We'll have bouncy castles and activities for children. The chance to interact with the team. So Wildcats head office have confirmed with us that the players will be available at that time for autograph sessions and to meet and greet with their fans. We'll probably have a little more on the stage where the coaching staff may want to address the fans, things like that. So it'll be a celebration of a great season and all things Wildcats.
Okay, great. And one more thing, I think we should probably reach out to bylaw if we haven't already.
Absolutely.
Just to make sure that there's nobody ticketed when they're coming downtown to celebrate this great event.
Certainly have that on the list, but thank you.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate it.
Merci beaucoup, Conseiller Crossman. No other questions. So we have a motion that's been modified by Conseiller Bourgeois, seconded by Conseiller Butler. So we will vote on that motion. It's electronic. Merci beaucoup. The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Donc, on attend. Conseiller Bourgeois, on vous oublie, votre lumière brille toujours. Là. OK?
Ah, c'est ça mon problème. Shane, I got a question for you. Don't take this the wrong way. Last week, I sent you an email saying citizens were on Facebook and complaining about the city not doing anything for the Wildcats, blah, blah, blah. So I sent you an email, what can we do? And I don't want to misinterpret you, and so you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as if, we were negotiating, we were discussing, please keep this hush-hush. So I found myself in an awkward position of not being able to ease, that kind of stuff. I just wanted to know why we weren't informed a week ago, 10 days, whenever it is that you started working on it, because this is a public matter, especially when we go for a parade.
Absolutely.
Right? So anything that's public, anything that's, this is our bailiwick. Not to say that it's not yours, but you should inform us, in my opinion. Now, maybe the rest of council doesn't care, but I would love to be informed before the people start complaining about the city not doing anything and telling us, you know, if it is something confidential, you can say confidential, here's what I recommend that you tell people about this. That's fine, I'll accept that. So I just want to express my, it's not disappointment, but my awkward position that I was put in because I knew you were working on it. I sort of guessed it. That's why I sent you an email.
Right.
And the people clamoring for, you know, seeing the games at the Oval, parade, that kind of stuff. So I'll just express it to you. If you have any comment, that's fine. But I just, why weren't we?
No, that's point well taken. And there's a lot of moving parts with all of these things. Unfortunately, you know, when you've got a team that is in the situation, well, fortunately, I should say, they are in the situation they're in at the Memorial Cup. And like I said, we were working with the Wildcats head office, front office, trying to determine when, how many players we can get, all of those things. So what we really didn't want is to get out there and create false expectation and then not be able to deliver. So it was really more about that. But point well taken. I mean, maybe there is something we could do next time where we could give a little more information. I certainly wasn't trying to hoard information. We were just trying to make sure that we could deliver on what we said. That's all.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to put council in this position that way either, that, you know, it's taken as a promise and then we can't deliver on something.
Yeah, and we weren't able to meet on something like, you know, specific as that until today, committee of the whole, that kind of stuff. But for this and for any other issue, sometimes you come with us to us with concert proposals and stuff. We are bound by confidentiality. All you have to bring it is at a private meeting, or if you want to send an email with confidential on it, that's fine. I mean, it behooves us to respect that. Now, I'm saying that, but I've been a victim of the former mayor leaking an email out there in the public. But I would hope that...
I'm certainly not going to comment on that.
No, but I'm pleased. It says it's unacceptable emails, and it does cover that you're not supposed to leak unauthorized email distribution. So if you say to us, we're working on a concert, please keep it confidential, we have to respect that by this policy. It's been broken before, but I promise you personally, and I'm sure that all of us who have sworn to respect our city policies, that we will respect it.
Sure.
Feel assured.
And I guess when you're using the concert example, if I may, we have to be very careful on that one because we have promoters involved. We are not the ones directly programming. So a lot of times I'm bound to them as to when they want that known or an artist known or something like that. So point taken. We'll do my best in the future.
Charles, adjournment, c'est beau. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone. Merci. C'est quoi? Oh, t'avais un item. Excusez-moi. Oh,
Merci. My point is, I looked at the minutes, the 28th of October, 27th, 24th of February, 24th of June. There's a whole bunch, there's probably half a dozen at least, directives to staff. There's also motions every once in a while. We don't know what the follow-up is. And my idea, and it may be wrong-headed, but my idea would be there's got to be somebody with a list at the city clerk's office of all, we have all these discussions, we give a directive to staff, we did on the, you know, rework the allocation of the half funding, the additional funds for Monday. I don't know if all of these things have been accomplished or not. So would it be too much to ask for staff to have a rolling list, sort of a rolling list of things that we asked our city manager to do? Just so we just so we are informed of where the progress is on these things. I don't know what the rest of council thinks about it, but I would like to be informed, because I don't have a secretary. I don't have any administrative assistant like the mayor has. I'm by myself, and I have a part-time job and another part-time job. So it's very difficult to keep track of everything that we've decided.
We can certainly take that back and provide information to council on that, for sure.
Donc, conseiller Légère.
I'd just like to point out that I think that's a great idea, but it's been brought up before. I remember bringing up wanting action items, and the city clerk saying, yes, we'll do that. So I think it's about time we do it. I do it in other meetings that I'm involved in. We have a list of action items and where they stand. And so that was a commitment. I don't know when it was, over a year ago. So yes, that would be great, because and I think say, here are the action items, and this is where we're going with this, so that we have a better understanding, whether they're motions or whether they're just strictly direction to staff. So I think that's great, and I understand the frustration. It's almost like you give up, but somebody else has brought it up again, so I'll support that. Thank you.
Merci, conseiller Légère. So, Nick, we don't have to invent the wheel on this. I'm sure other municipalities are doing this. Adjourn the meeting. Conseiller Richard. That wasn't too bad.